When I was 22, I rented the basement level of my parents' house. It wasn't glamorous, but it saved money and gave me at least some privacy, or so I thought. The downstairs was separated from the main floor by a lockable door, and it felt like a studio apartment. A tiny kitchen tucked into the living room, a hallway leading to the bedroom, bathroom, and laundry room, plus a private side entrance. It was just enough independence to pretend I was on my own. That particular weekend, my parents were gone, which meant I could finally relax without worrying about my mom appearing mid-conversation or my dad wandering down looking for something. I invited my friends Ryan and Luke over. We sat on the oversized sectional in my living room, watching the hockey game, blasting music, laughing too loudly, and drinking. The buzz hit hard by the third period. Since the upstairs fridge was bigger, I kept the drinks up there and didn't bother locking the connecting door while my parents were away. After the game, the guys decided to crash on the huge couch. It could fit all three of us if needed, but I headed to my bedroom, shutting the door and locking it. Force of habit more than anything. Hours later, something yanked me out of sleep. Footsteps. Heavy, yet wandering. They came from upstairs. Half awake, I figured it was one of the guys, stumbling up for water. I shut my eyes again, ready to pass out. Then my doorknob twisted. Someone trying to open my room. I froze. It wasn't frantic, just a slow, subtle rattle. Still, I didn't say anything. I assumed it was one of them checking if I was awake or messing around. A minute later, it stopped, and eventually, so did my thoughts. I drifted back to sleep. The next morning, Ryan was already gone, but Luke was still on the couch. I casually asked if he tried coming into my room. He frowned, thought about it, then shrugged. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. He didn't remember much. I didn't bother asking Ryan. Honestly, it barely crossed my mind. We got breakfast sandwiches and coffee, sat in my backyard, talked about nothing important, and Luke left. The rest of the day passed normally. I didn't even think about the footsteps. That night, exhausted, I crawled into bed. I watched an hour of TV before turning it off. Silence wrapped the room. Almost immediately, creaking above me. Slow steps, but too deliberate to ignore. The exact same pattern from the previous night. My heartbeat quickened. Was the house settling? Pipes? Animals? My brain fought itself. I sat up, listening. Then, the doorknob. A soft knock first, then the turning handle. Something cold spread through me. This wasn't one of my friends this time. I wasn't drunk. I was completely alert. I didn't speak. Instead, I grabbed my phone and began frantically texting everyone, my parents, my friends, praying someone would respond, tell me it was a joke. No replies. My parents wouldn't be home until Monday. I slid silently from my bed and hid behind my dresser, gripping a heavy metal object. Pathetic protection, but it made me feel less helpless. Minutes dragged by. Nothing. No more knocks. I didn't dare approach the door. Finally, I dialed 911, whispering that someone was trying to enter my room. The operator stayed on the line with me, guiding my breathing, assuring me officers were on their way. I refused to leave the room. When police arrived, they tapped my window and I climbed out after handing over the key to the side entrance. 3 officers searched my floor first. Tiny, open layout, nowhere to hide. Then they moved upstairs. I stood in the hallway outside bedrooms, pointing out which rooms were which. My parents' room was last. Barely 30 seconds after they entered, I heard shouting. I looked inside. 2 officers were crouched near the bed, yelling at someone underneath. I only saw a dirty sneaker, then a grimy hand. My stomach twisted. I was ordered downstairs. Minutes later, they brought him out. A tall, filthy man with matted hair spilling from under a hooded sweatshirt, bare legs below old shorts. His eyes were hollow but hateful, staring directly at me, like I had ruined something for him. I didn't know him. I had never seen him. As soon as he was shoved outside, the air felt lighter. The officers explained that nothing seemed stolen, and if we wanted to pursue charges, we'd have to call the precinct later. They left me in my silent house. I immediately messaged everyone again, shaking. Only a few late-night responses trickled in. I barely slept. In the morning, I called my parents. They were shocked, but after hearing he was homeless and had taken nothing, decided not to push charges. They figured maybe the guy wandered in because I left the door unlocked while the music blared that first night. But a darker thought followed me. What if he hadn't wandered in that night? What if he'd been in the house before, listening, moving unnoticed, waiting? I changed the locks after that weekend. No more unlocked doors, no more casual assumptions. Privacy suddenly felt fragile, like the thin wood of that bedroom door, something anyone could twist, knock on, or slip under without you knowing. Sometimes, when the house creaks now, I still pause, listening. I've always loved quiet places. 5 years ago, I traded city sirens and traffic for a cabin tucked deep in upstate New York. No neighbors, no passing cars, just endless trees and the lake behind my porch. If silence had a home, it would be here. I spent my days fishing, evenings on the deck with a beer, watching the sky turn gold over the woods. Alone was never lonely for me, until it stopped being peaceful. 2 weeks ago, it started. I was outside like usual, staring into the black tree line, when something cracked, a twig snapping somewhere far off. I brushed it off. Deer, raccoon, fox, the woods are alive, and I'd long learned to ignore them. But the noises didn't stop. They became nightly. At first it was harmless, rustling, shifting leaves, small sounds that blended into the wood's background hum. Then one night, it changed, scratching. Soft, deliberate, right below the spare bedroom window. The kind of sound something makes when it knows you're listening. I stood up, heart nudging faster. After a few seconds, it stopped. Probably a squirrel, I told myself. Something about it didn't sit right, but I locked up and went to bed anyway. The next night, it happened again, louder, closer, like fingertips against glass. I walked to the window and pushed the curtain aside just enough to look out. Moonlight painted the yard in silver, shadows stretched long and still. No movement, no animal. Convincing myself it was a branch, I went back to bed, ignoring the prickle crawling across my back. But the next night, the sound wasn't scratching. It was tapping. 3 short taps, as if someone was knocking. I shot upright, snatched my flashlight, and crept toward the spare room. Nothing outside, nothing moving. But the air felt wrong, heavy, watchful. I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the floor became footsteps. Exhaustion eventually pulled me under. After nearly a week of that, I snapped. I decided to confront whatever it was, animal or not. I grabbed a crowbar from my shed and opened the spare bedroom. The room felt stale, untouched. I hadn't used it in months. I checked under the bed and behind furniture. Nothing. But as I turned toward the door, something caught my eye. The closet. Its door was cracked open. I didn't remember leaving it that way. A cold pit opened in my stomach. I moved slowly, crowbar raised, and pulled it open. At first, it looked empty. Then my flashlight caught something. A scrap of fabric clinging to the back wall. Dark, torn, not mine. Someone had been in my house. I backed out, slammed the bedroom door, and bolted it. I couldn't stay inside, not knowing that closet had been open. I spent the night on the couch, baseball bat beside me. No tapping, no scratching. Silence, but the wrong kind. The kind before a storm. The next night, I refused to run again. I lay in bed, daring sleep to take me. Tap, tap, tap. I was out of bed instantly, flashlight in hand. I stormed to the spare room, ripped the curtain back, and this time there was something. A shape. A human outline standing motionless in the dark, just beyond the window glass. Not close enough for detail, just far enough to know it was watching. My blood went ice cold. I stumbled backward, ran to the phone, dialed 911 with shaking hands. There's someone outside my house. I think they're still here.
The dispatcher sent units, but before I could grab my jacket, a floorboard creaked. Not outside, inside. Someone was in the hallway. I didn't look back. I bolted out the rear door, into the trees, running blind between trunks and brush until the distant flash of red and blue lights cut through the branches. I hid behind a maple, shaking, watching officers swarm the cabin with guns drawn. But I didn't go with them. I couldn't. Whatever was in that house wasn't finished. Something had been waiting, scratching walls, tapping glass, leaving scraps of itself in my closet. I called the police later, only to tell them I was alive, so they wouldn't waste a search party. But I never went back. The cabin sits empty now, sinking into the woods. Sometimes at night, even far away from it, I swear I still hear that tapping. Whoever, whatever, was out there is still out there. And it knows I ran.
This happened when I was about 15 years old, in 2014. My parents had gone out for the evening to a late movie, so it was just me and my dog Abby at home. It was around 12:30 a.m., and I was up messaging friends online and watching videos. In the middle of typing, Abby suddenly started barking in the living room. I assumed maybe my parents had returned and waited. After almost a minute of barking without any sign of the door opening, I got up to check. Abby was standing at the window facing our driveway, barking steadily. The outside lights were off, and it was too dark to see much, but when I squinted through the glass, I saw only our single parked car, meaning my parents weren't back yet. I figured Abby probably reacted to a neighbor's car door or someone driving by. We lived on a busy road, so noise even after midnight wasn't unusual. I went back to chatting online, but every few minutes, Abby barked again, and I kept thinking I heard sounds around the house. Just when I was about to calm her down, I could have sworn I heard a faint knock or rustling at the living room door. My nerves were starting to kick in. I crept back to the living room, too afraid to look through the peephole, terrified someone's face might be staring back. I checked that the door was locked and turned to leave when knocking suddenly came from the side door. My heart jumped. Were my parents locked out? Was someone trying to break in? Was there more than one person? Before I could process, I heard someone jiggling the basement doorknob. Our basement was under the house. You had to walk around the yard, go under the deck, and know exactly where the door was. You wouldn't find it unless you already knew or were determined. Abby was pacing frantically, barking, growling, and searching room to room. It felt like the house was being surrounded. The basement noises grew louder, then suddenly stopped. My stomach dropped. I stood frozen, waiting for footsteps or movement. Then Abby bolted down the stairs, snarling, a sound I had never heard from her. She was a gentle black lab, but in that moment, she sounded vicious. Seconds stretched like minutes. Then Abby went silent. That was worse than the noise. I called her upstairs and slammed the interior basement door shut. I grabbed the landline, I didn't have a cell phone yet, and ran with Abby to the closet in my parents' bedroom where one of our guns was kept. Sitting there armed, trying to dial 911, I suddenly heard the front door open. Abby shot out of the room before I could stop her. I yelled after her until I heard my parents' voices. I rushed out to see them petting Abby, staring confused at me. I explained everything in a panic. My mom looked horrified. My dad armed himself and searched the entire house and property, inside and out. Nothing. I didn't sleep. The next afternoon, someone knocked at the front door. I instantly hid. My dad opened it. It was my Uncle Pete, holding an envelope. Pete was unsettling, always overly familiar, socially off, the kind adults whispered about but never confronted. He unnerved everyone, especially kids. I played softball, and his daughter Kate, my cousin, played in a younger league. I helped her with pitching and fielding sometimes, partly because I felt bad that she had him as a father. From another room, my mom and I overheard Pete saying something like, "I tried to stop by last night to drop this off, but no one was home."
Moments later, we heard the door slam. My dad walked in furious. He said Pete admitted he was the one creeping around the house last night trying to drop off the envelope. Inside was a thank you card and a gift card. My dad threatened him then and there. We barely saw him again. Looking back, I'm at least relieved I learned who it was. Otherwise, I'd still wonder if it was a stranger or something worse. I'm thankful Abby was there. She definitely scared him off. But I still think about it. Why so late? Why try multiple entrances? Why keep jiggling doors when no one answered? Why not call first? And worst of all, what would he have done if he'd gotten inside?
I was 26 when I moved into a fixer-upper outside Flagstaff, Arizona, right off Route 89, close to the woods but far enough from town that you never heard cars unless they stopped in front of your house. The house wasn't fancy, but it was mine. 2 bedrooms, a small deck, a detached garage, and a big yard full of pine needles. I worked nights at a warehouse, so quiet mornings at home meant everything to me. The first month was perfect. Coffee on the porch, elk sightings near the tree line, cool mountain wind drifting through my curtains. Then, the nights changed. It was around 1:30 a.m. the first time it happened. I was lying in bed scrolling my phone before sleep when I heard gravel crunch outside, like tires rolling slowly over the driveway. My motion light flicked on. I froze. Nobody ever visited this late, especially unannounced. I crept to the window and peeked through the blinds. Nothing, no car, no person, just silence and my yard glowing under the blind glare of the motion sensor. I told myself maybe it was an animal, but the sound didn't feel like an animal. I locked my bedroom door, habit more than fear, and eventually fell asleep. The next night, around the same time, it happened again. Crunching gravel, light turning on, silence. I sat upright in bed listening to the air conditioner hum, heart beating faster each second. Again, nothing turned up outside. One morning, I stood outside checking the yard when I noticed something I hadn't seen before: boot prints. Not hiking boot tread, work boot prints, leading from the road to the side of my house. They weren't mine. I told myself someone maybe knocked and I never heard. I brushed it off. It wasn't until the 5th night I really started to fear something was wrong. I was asleep when I jolted awake to a noise. Not gravel, not a car, footsteps on my porch. Slow, deliberate. The boards creaked under weight. Then a slight metallic rattle, my screen door handle twisting. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept near my bed and dragged my phone into my hand. The twisting stopped, followed by the faintest tapping on my front door, like knuckles lightly brushing it. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps again. I didn't move, didn't breathe. 10 minutes must have passed before the motion light shut off. Eventually, I heard nothing, just wind in the trees. The next morning, I checked the porch. The screen door latch was slightly lifted, left halfway open. That's when I installed cameras, 1 on the porch, 2 facing the yard. The camera recorded movement 2 days later. I watched the footage with my stomach tightening. 2:07, porch camera activates. But there was nothing on the screen. Motion triggered, but nobody visible. I checked another angle. Same thing. Motion alert, no person. Either the sensor was malfunctioning or something was moving just beyond view. That night, I barely slept. On Friday, I finally left for a weekend trip to visit my brother in Phoenix. Before leaving, I locked every window, bolted the doors, and checked my cameras. The drive was peaceful. It felt good being around people again. Sunday night, when I got home, the house felt colder than usual. Not temperature, air, still, tight, wrong. Something shifted in the dark hallway, the tiniest shadow shift. I flicked the hallway light. Nothing there. I convinced myself travel fatigue was messing with me. I went to bed early. Around 1:55 a.m., I woke to a noise coming from the guest bedroom.
I didn't even use that room. It was barely furnished. But I heard something. A whisper? A shuffle? "Hello?" I called out before I could stop myself. No answer. I sat up, grabbed the bat again, crept into the hall. The floor creaked under my feet. The guest door was slightly open, just a crack, though I always kept it shut. I nudged it with the bat. The room was empty. But the closet door, one I never used, stood wide open. A draft hit my face. I stepped back. I checked every inch, forcing myself not to panic. Nothing there. I closed everything, locked my bedroom, and sat awake till daylight. It was around noon when I found something new. On the inside of the porch screen door was something scratched into the paint. "Come out." Small, faint, like traced with a key edge. My breath left me. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I sat on my couch watching the cameras from my phone. Around 2:03 a.m., the driveway pinged. Motion detected. I opened the feed. There was he. A tall man in a hooded jacket walking slowly across my yard. Not a jogger, not a neighbor, not lost. He moved calmly toward the porch. My heart pounded. I dialed 911 and whispered to the dispatcher. While I was on the line, the porch camera activated. The man stepped up to the door. He tried the handle. Then, he looked into the camera. Directly. His face was long, thin, pale. His lips curled like he was smiling. I ran to the bedroom to lock myself in. The dispatcher stayed on, telling me officers were minutes away. The porch camera showed him leaning close to my door. Then he put something against the glass, paper, then walked out of frame. Police arrived 6 minutes later, felt like years. They searched but found nothing, just footprints leading back to the road. When they left, I finally checked a paper on my door. A Polaroid photo of me, asleep in my bed, taken through a window. That was the night I sold the house. I moved within a month, never spent another night there. Whoever he was never got caught. Police said maybe it was a trespasser, maybe someone passing through, but whoever took that picture knew. He'd been inside before, close enough to watch me sleep. Sometimes, even now living in Colorado, I wake up at 2 a.m. convinced I hear gravel crunching outside. And every time, I check my window the same way, just to make sure nobody is waiting on the porch.
I grew up in Salem, Massachusetts. Yes, the witch trial town everyone loves to romanticize. To tourists, it's quirky magic shops, museums, and Halloween decorations. To locals, it's a place where the past never really feels dead. When I was 12, my parents bought this old colonial house not far from Chestnut Street. It had slanted floors, thick beams, and windows that rattled whenever the wind passed. The realtor called it historic. My mother called it charming. I called it creepy. The house had one locked room on the 3rd floor, a faded green door with rusted hinges. The realtor skipped it during the tour, saying it was just storage. Weirdly, my parents never bothered with it either. I assumed it was full of junk. Months passed before I even thought about it again. One late afternoon, I was home alone. My parents were in Boston for an anniversary dinner, and I had the house to myself. Just me and our beagle, Carter. I decided to explore the attic, a maze of boxes and dust, when I heard it. 3 slow taps. Tap, tap. They came from behind that locked green door. Carter's head snapped toward the sound, ears stiff, tail tucked tight. I froze. Maybe wood settling? Maybe raccoons? Trying to convince myself, I turned away. But then came another sound, faint, like someone dragging a chair across the floor inside that room. I noped out of there fast. Night fell. I camped downstairs with Carter, distracting myself with pizza and video games. The house was quiet, until somewhere near midnight when the tapping started again. This time it echoed through the ceiling. Tap,
Tap. Carter growled, low, uncertain. Then the lights flickered. The old house did that sometimes, so I brushed it off. But when the tapping shifted into footsteps, pacing overhead, I muted the TV. The footsteps paused, right above me. Then a whisper. Just one word. Please. I don't care how brave you pretend to be at 12. Whispers from locked rooms don't feel like imagination. I grabbed Carter and fled upstairs to my room, barricading the door with a dresser. We slept with the light on. The next day, I told my mom what happened. "Oh, honey, it's just this old house settling," she sighed. "You read too many ghost books." Dad just laughed. Adults never listen. So I stopped trying. Weeks went by, but the weirdness didn't stop. Sometimes the house smelled like smoke when no one was cooking. Sometimes the temperature dropped in one hallway, only that hallway. Sometimes Carter would sit and stare at the green door, whining. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a February blizzard, snow piling against windows, wind howling. The power flickered out around 9. My parents lit candles downstairs while I lay in my room shivering under blankets. Around midnight, I awoke to someone knocking on my bedroom door. Soft, rhythmic. Not my dad, he always knocked loud. Not Mom, she'd call my name. I didn't answer. The doorknob twisted slowly. That's when Carter, who always slept at my feet, lifted his head and started growling. The knob stopped turning. For several minutes, nothing. I was about to call for my parents when I heard footsteps walk away, toward the attic stairs. The house went silent. Suddenly, a crash exploded overhead, like something fell hard. I jumped out of bed and stumbled into the hallway, heart pounding. Mom and Dad were already outside their room, panicked. "All the picture frames fell upstairs," Dad muttered. We climbed the stairs. The hallway walls were lined with family photos, except nearly every frame lay shattered on the floor. Just then, a new sound, loud banging, from behind the green door. It was violent, desperate. My dad grabbed a hammer. Mom begged him not to open it. "What if someone's trapped in there?" he yelled over the banging. He struck the old lock, metal ringing against metal until it snapped. Then he pulled the door open. Cold air rushed out, smelling like old wood and something sour. Inside was a small room, empty except for a single rocking chair, slowly moving back and forth as if someone had just stood from it. No wind, no open window, just movement. My mom gasped. Dad walked inside, flashlight beams scanning peeling wallpaper and bare floorboards. A sudden scream cut through the air. It wasn't Dad, it came from behind us. A girl's scream, high, sharp, echoing through the hall. Carter barked furiously. We ran out, slamming the door behind us. That night, none of us slept. The next morning, my parents made phone calls. Not plumbers or electricians, the Historical Society. Apparently, the house was once owned by a woman named Eliza Turner, who lived alone after her husband and daughter died in a fire. Eliza was said to have lost her mind from grief. Locals whispered she kept speaking to her daughter long after she was gone. Eliza died in that very room. My parents never told me this. I overheard them whispering. They called it folklore. I called it warning. A week later, Dad hired a carpenter to seal that room. New locks, reinforcement, everything. We never went up there after. But the house didn't forget. Sometimes at night, I'd hear footsteps overhead, even though the room was shut tight. Sometimes Carter barked at the ceiling. Sometimes I'd wake to the sound of a rocking chair creaking steadily. The whisper came back once, faint, right beside my ear as I lay in bed. Please. I didn't tell anyone. I just stopped sleeping upstairs. We moved out when I was 17. My parents said it was for more space, but I knew. Years later, I returned to Salem as an adult and walked past the old house. Someone else lived there now. Fresh paint, nice lawn, kids' toys on the porch. I almost kept walking. until I saw it. In the third-floor window, through lace curtains, sat a rocking chair, moving slowly. No one else seemed to notice. As I stared, the chair stopped. Something leaned into the window, just a shadowy outline, like someone peering down at me. A voice, faint but unmistakable, brushed past my ear again. "Please." I walked faster. I didn't look back. Because some houses aren't haunted, they're lonely. And loneliness never leaves.
I grew up in Amarillo, Texas, where the skies are wide and evenings feel endless. Our house sat alone on a quiet stretch of desert road. My parents loved the peace. I hated it. Too still, too empty. We moved there when I was 10. The house was strange from day one. Long, narrow hallways with doors spaced too closely, like someone tried to cram extra rooms into a blueprint that wasn't designed for it. The realtor called it architecturally unique. Dad called it a bargain. I called it wrong. Only weeks after moving in, I noticed things didn't line up. No matter how many times I counted, the number of doors in the hallway didn't match the rooms in the house. 7 doors, but only 6 rooms. The extra door was always locked. Mom shrugged it off, said it must be a closet. But the hallway walls always felt slightly warped, as if the house stretched itself when you weren't looking. The first strange incident happened late one night. I was thirsty, so I went for a glass of water. The lights were off, but the moonlight lit the hallway pale blue. I counted doors out of habit. 1, 2, 3. When I reached 6, I stopped. 7, 8. I blinked, confused, and looked again. Only 7 doors now. I must have miscounted, I thought. But deep down, I knew I hadn't. Months passed, and the house only grew stranger. Sometimes walking the hallway took longer than it should, like the flooring stretched beneath my steps. Sometimes I swore the house whispered, my name slipping through walls like dust. When I mentioned this to Dad, he laughed. "It's just an old house settling. Adults always have excuses." Then came the night everything changed. School was closed due to a weekend storm. My parents were out for dinner. I was home alone watching TV when the power surged and died. The house sank into a heavy silence. I flicked on my phone flashlight and walked toward the hallway. That's when I noticed it. The hallway felt wider, longer, like someone had pulled its ends further apart. The air grew colder, the shadows deepened, and the 8th door stood there, clear as day, one more than should exist. This door wasn't wooden. It was blackened, like burned coal. The handle was metal, cold and twisted. Something inside me screamed to walk away. Instead, I reached for the knob. It burned. I jumped back, heart hammering, the metal scorching my palm. Carter, our golden retriever, suddenly bolted down the hall, barking wildly at the door. His back fur bristled, teeth bared. Then came a new sound, scratching, from behind the blackened door. Long, slow, like fingernails. The door shuddered. I ran, slamming myself into my bedroom and locking the door until my parents came home hours later. I kept it to myself after that, but the hallway didn't stop. Sometimes it felt too long, like I would walk forever and never reach the end. Sometimes when I glanced back, the far wall seemed distant, shrinking into darkness. Then, one night while lying in bed, I heard someone walking in the hallway. Slow steps, heel to toe, pacing from one end to the other. Mom had gone to bed. Dad snored beside her. This wasn't them. The steps stopped outside my room. Then 2 knuckles tapped my door. Tap, tap. I didn't breathe, didn't move. After a long silence, the footsteps faded. But from behind the wall beside my bed, where the hallway ran, came a whisper. "Help." I froze, heart pounding. It returned, faint, like words lost in insulation. "Let me out."
I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next day, I walked the hallway under sunlight. Everything looked normal. 7 doors, all accounted for. No 8th door. No blackened handle. Had I imagined it? School, homework, weeks passed. I convinced myself maybe it was dreams mixing with fear. Until one stormy evening, when thunder rattled the windows. The lights flickered. The hallway stretched again. The blackened door returned. Carter growled, backing away. This time, the doorknob didn't burn. It felt freezing cold. My hand turned it before I could stop myself. The door clicked. A gust of air rushed out, not fresh, but stale, grave-like. Inside wasn't a room. It was a hallway, impossibly long, stretching into endless darkness, walls bending inward like a throat. For a second, I saw someone far down that corridor. Small, pale, hand reaching, face hidden. "Please," they whispered, voice echoing without air. The darkness behind them flexed, something shifting, and they were yanked back by unseen hands. The door slammed shut, by itself, rattling the frame. I sprinted to my parents, shouting what I saw. Dad grabbed me by the shoulders. "It's in your head," he insisted. "This house isn't haunted. You're scaring yourself." But I saw the fear in his eyes. He'd been hearing things too. After that, I avoided the hallway unless I had to use it. I slept in the living room on the couch for weeks. One night, I woke at 3 a.m. to Carter whining. I sat up, dizzy, and saw him standing at the edge of the hallway. Every door stood open, except one, the blackened one. It was wide, impossibly wide, emitting darkness that swallowed light. Carter whimpered, shrinking back. I heard footsteps inside, running. Then a child's voice screamed, raw, desperate. "Don't leave me here!" Something huge moved behind that scream, something wet and dragging, and Carter barked nervously. I slammed the hallway light switch. Everything snapped back to normal. No extra door, no voice, no darkness, just silence. I broke down crying. We moved 2 months later. Dad claimed he got a job transfer, but I knew he'd been waking up at night sweating, staring at the hallway. Mom avoided walking past it without humming loudly, as if drowning something out. On our last day in the house, I walked the hallway one final time. 7 doors. But near the end, I saw carved faintly into the wall, as if dug by fingernails. "Let me out." I looked away, heart tight. When we drove off, I watched the house shrink in the rearview mirror. For a moment, I swore the hallway stretched outward, like arms reaching. Years later, I saw our old Amarillo house in a property listing online. The realtor's notes read, "Unique floor plan, additional storage space." The photos included the hallway. Something about it looked too long, as if it was waiting to grow again. And sometimes, when I dream, I hear that voice. "Let me out. If walls can stretch, maybe they can hunger too."
I was 19 when I moved out of my parents' place to babysit for the Crawford family in Boise, Idaho. Their house was large, modern, freshly painted, everything opposite of the creaking place I grew up in. I thought babysitting their toddler, Ella, would be easy money. Just a few evenings a week while her parents worked late shifts at the hospital. The first night was calm. Pizza, cartoons, early bedtime. Mrs. Crawford handed me the baby monitor before leaving. "If she rakes or cries, just talk through it," she said. "Sometimes she gets scared of shadows." I nodded. Kids had imaginations. I didn't know hers wasn't the only imagination in that house. Around 10 p.m., I sat on their couch scrolling my phone. On the monitor screen, Ella slept peacefully in her lavender room, stuffed toys tucked neatly around her. An hour passed. Then static crackled through the speaker. I sat up. "Ella?" I whispered into the mic. The monitor hissed. Then a tiny voice answered. "Don't let her in." My skin prickled. Maybe Ella was dreaming, talking in her sleep. I checked the screen. She lay still, eyes closed. A minute later, the static vanished. I told myself it was interference. The next night, things escalated. Ella refused to sleep, pointing at the far corner of her room. "The lady," she whispered, burying her face in my shoulder. "What lady?" "The one watching." I scanned the empty corner. Nothing. I finally rocked her until she fell asleep and slipped out. Downstairs, the monitor flickered again. This time I heard soft humming, not Ella's. A woman's tone, low, wandering, like an old lullaby. I stared at the screen. Ella slept. But something blurred in the upper corner, a dark shape I couldn't focus on. The humming grew clearer. "Hush now, little one." Static swallowed the rest. I muted the monitor and sat frozen until Mr. and Mrs. Crawford came home. They thanked me for the night. I didn't mention anything. Who wants to scare their employers with ghost stories? Night 3 changed my mind. Ella clung to me at bedtime. "She comes when you go downstairs," Ella whispered. "She talks to me." I forced a smile. "You just miss your mom and dad." Ella shook her head violently. "No, she was here before them." Her words shouldn't have chilled me, but they did. She finally slept. Downstairs, I stared at the monitor longer than usual. Past midnight, I heard what sounded like footsteps in Ella's room, slow, dragging. The screen flicked. Ella lay still, but her closet door, which I had closed earlier, now gaped open. Something moved behind it, too tall to be the child. The monitor crackled. "You shouldn't leave her alone." I dropped the device. Heart racing, I ran upstairs. Ella slept, untouched. But the closet door slammed shut the moment I entered. I froze. That room suddenly felt colder, as if breath hovered near my ear. "Leave," a whisper slid behind me. I grabbed Ella and slept on the couch until her parents returned. That night, I told them everything, expecting laughter. Instead, their faces drained. Mrs. Crawford swallowed hard. "You weren't the first sitter to mention her." My stomach nodded. Mr. Crawford cleared his throat. "This house was built over old farmland," he said quietly. "Legend says a woman who lost her baby wandered here. Locals swear she still looks for children." They tried claiming it was just stories, but their shaking hands told otherwise. I quit the job. A year later, curiosity got the best of me. I searched online. The property had been listed for sale, price lowered twice. One review from a previous owner caught my eye. The nursery door never stayed shut. The baby monitor kept talking to us, but it was never our daughter. Another review simply read, "We moved because she wouldn't stop singing." I clicked the listing photos. The nursery looked the same, lavender walls, white crib. In the mirror above the dresser, something faint reflected. Long hair, a twisted silhouette. I closed the browser. Sometimes, late at night, when my apartment is silent, I hear faint static from my phone, like a monitor reconnecting. Once I swear I heard humming, a lullaby. And every time, a chill runs through me, remembering the words that came through that crackling speaker. "She thinks you can save her." Maybe she wasn't talking about Ella. Maybe she meant me. And maybe she's still looking. I grew up in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Coal town, old houses, quiet streets where everyone knows everyone else. But nobody ever knew what lived under our house. My parents bought a fixer-upper on Birch Street when I was 14. It had 2 floors, an attic, and a basement that smelled like rust and wet stone. The previous owner left in a hurry, boxes still in the hall, dishes still packed. Nobody talked about why. The first time I went into the basement, I noticed a small square window set into the concrete wall. But here's the thing, it didn't face outside. It faced dirt, just soil, packed tight, like someone bricked it in with earth. "Old coal chute," Dad shrugged, "nothing to worry about." But the glass looked freshly cleaned, like someone wiped it from the other side. Strange things started almost immediately. At night, I heard tapping beneath my bedroom floor, slow, searching taps. Our dog Kipper refused to go near the basement door, growling low whenever it creaked. One afternoon, home alone, I went downstairs looking for paint supplies. The basement air felt wrong, damp, heavy.
Then I saw it. The basement window wasn't dark anymore. Something moved behind the glass. Something pale. I froze. It looked like a hand, fingers pressed against the dirt, dragging slowly across the pane. But instead of pushing through, it disappeared into the soil, like the dirt swallowed it. I ran upstairs, slamming the door. Dad blamed mice scratching. Mom said old houses played tricks. I didn't argue, but I avoided the basement after that. Weeks passed. Strange noises continued. Tapping, scratching, sometimes whispering, like voices drifting up pipes. One stormy night, thunder shook the house. My parents went to bed early. I stayed up gaming with headphones until the connection cut out. The basement door creaked open by itself. Cold air rolled up the stairs. "Kipper," I whispered. He barked from under the couch, refusing to go near the kitchen. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. The light at the bottom of the stairs flickered, casting shadows. Then I saw it. A pale shape backed away from the basement window, like someone crouching. I shut the door and shoved a chair beneath the knob. I slept with Kipper beside me. 2 months later, my parents went to a wedding weekend, leaving me home alone. The first night was calm. The second wasn't. Wind rattled the house. Rain hit the roof like nails. Sometime after midnight, I woke to scratching again, louder, directly under my bed this time. Kipper whimpered. Then, silence, until the basement door hinge squealed downstairs. Footsteps, heavy, came climbing up. I grabbed a baseball bat and woke Kipper. We crept to the staircase. The basement door stood wide open. Cold air spilled out. "Kipper," I whispered. He barked from under the couch, refusing to go near the kitchen. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. The light at the bottom of the stairs flickered, casting shadows. Then I saw it. A pale shape backed away from the basement window, like someone crouching. I shut the door and shoved a chair beneath the knob. I slept with Kipper beside me. 2 months later, my parents went to a wedding weekend, leaving me home alone. The first night was calm. The second wasn't. Wind rattled the house. Rain hit the roof like nails. Sometime after midnight, I woke to scratching again, louder, directly under my bed this time. Kipper whimpered. Then, silence, until the basement door hinge squealed downstairs. Footsteps, heavy, came climbing up. I grabbed a baseball bat and woke Kipper. We crept to the staircase. The basement door stood wide open. Cold air spilled out. I reached the bottom step and looked down. The basement light flickered on and off, like someone stepping beneath it. Then it stayed on. The window wasn't buried anymore. The dirt was gone. Something peered through. 2 eyes, pale, wide, staring straight at me. I bolted back upstairs and slammed the door. This time I barricaded it with chairs, boxes, anything. I sat awake until sunrise. When my parents returned, I begged them to let us move. Dad laughed at first, until Mom mentioned she'd started hearing tapping too. She admitted she'd avoided laundry because the basement didn't feel right. Dad finally went down to check things out. Mom and I waited with Kipper, listening for yelling, screams, anything. Minutes passed. Then Dad came up, face pale. "There's water seepage," he muttered. "I'll call someone." But Dad's hands were trembling. A structural repair guy came days later. He hammered at the buried window, planning to reseal it. I watched from the top of the stairs. When he drilled into the dirt, the soil collapsed inward, leaving a hollow space behind the wall. He leaned close with a flashlight. Jesus Christ. Dad stepped down fast. The man whispered to him. I heard only fragments. Not sealed right. Like someone dug. How long? That evening, the man sealed the wall with concrete blocks. Mom insisted we go to bed early. I still heard faint tapping beneath the boards. A few months passed without incident. I almost convinced myself it had been imagination. Until the spring thaw. Ground softened, rain melted snow into the soil. One night around 2 a.m., Kipper growled violently toward the basement door. I crept over. The door moved, not opening, just pulsing inward, like something pushing from the other side. Kipper barked. The basement light flickered. My parents woke and ran down. We all watched, frozen, as the doorframe bowed forward, wood splintering slightly, then stopped. Dad whispered, "We're leaving tomorrow." We moved out in June. A decade later, I visited Scranton to see friends. One night we were talking about haunted places, and Birch Street came up. One friend said, "That old house? Yeah, the new owners had to tear out the basement. They said they found a dried-up tunnel behind a wall, like somebody dug their way in from underground." Another chimed in. "They said it looked like someone lived in it." My blood ran cold. I never told them about the window, about the hand, about the eyes watching me. But sometimes, at night, when everything is quiet, I still hear faint tapping, like something traveling through the dirt. Sometimes it feels like it followed me, waiting for soft floorboards or unfinished basements. I never go near cellar windows anymore, because I learned something. Windows don't just let things out. Sometimes they let things in.
When my family moved to Charleston, South Carolina, I expected sweet tea, marsh air, and slow summers. I didn't expect the house to speak to me. The place was old, a 1900s two-story near the harbor. Weathered shutters, brick chimney, creaky stairs. My mom adored the charm. My dad liked the price. I just wanted a room big enough for my desk and posters. On move-in day, the inspector mentioned one odd thing. Previous owner complained of animal noise in the walls, he said. Probably mice or raccoons. Normal enough, right? Except we never found droppings, never heard skittering. Only the voice. It started the second night. I was lying in bed when I heard a faint whisper coming from the wall next to me. Not through the door, not through the vents, inside the wall. Hello? My body stiffened. Wind? Pipes? I held my breath. Can you hear me? Clear words, soft, kind, too human. I turned my lamp on fast and pressed an ear to the plaster. Nothing. The next morning, Mom mentioned hearing talk radio faintly, but she brushed it off. Dad blamed thin insulation. I tried to forget it, but it didn't stop. Over the next week, the voice grew more confident, whispering to me late at night. "Why are you afraid? I just want to talk." Sometimes it sounded like a child, sometimes like an old man. Never the same tone twice. One night I whispered back, "Who are you?" Silence. Then the wall thumped once, like someone hit it from inside. I jumped out of bed, heart racing. After that, I kept my light on every night. Things escalated when my parents left for a weekend trip, leaving me with my older sister, Rachel. She slept in her room downstairs. I stayed upstairs, glued to horror games and pizza to distract myself. Past midnight, the house creaked. Then the voice returned, louder than ever. "I know you're alone." I nearly dropped my controller. I turned my music off. The whispering kept going, threading through drywall like breath. "Come closer." I backed toward the door. Then a sound, like nails scraping, traveled across the wall. Rachel called up, "Turn your volume down." "It's not me," I yelled back. She came upstairs annoyed, but when she entered my room, the voice stopped cold. "Spooky house," she joked. I didn't laugh. The next day, Rachel noticed something I'd missed. Tiny cracks around the wall outlet, like the drywall was swelling. "We should tell Dad," she muttered.
That night, she slept in her room, and I stayed awake playing games until eyelids drooped. Around 3 a.m., tapping woke me, directly behind my pillow. Slow, measured. Then a voice. "Let me out." I bolted from the room. Rachel's door was ajar. I shook her awake. "There's someone in the walls." She groaned, half asleep, and followed me upstairs. We turned on the lights. Silence. Then, right in front of us, the wall bulged slightly, like something pressed from inside, pushing outward. Rachel's face drained. We backed away. The bulge sank back. We slept downstairs that night. When Mom and Dad returned, we told them everything. They exchanged looks, the kind that said they already knew something was wrong. Dad finally admitted. Previous owners claimed voices too. Mom whispered they thought it was the house remembering them. That night, we moved our beds downstairs, but the voice followed. I heard it through floorboards, vents, even furniture. "You can't leave me," it said once. Dad hired a contractor to open the wall where Rachel saw the bulge. The man cut through the drywall. No pipes, no nests, just empty space. A narrow cavity stretching far beyond where the bedroom should end. He reached his arm inside with a flashlight, pulled back slowly. "There's another void behind this, bigger." Dad looked uneasy. The contractor recommended sealing it, air pockets and moisture issues. They patched it. For a week, the house was silent. Then, on Friday night, the voice returned, but different now. Not whispering, screaming. "Why did you seal me in?" Walls shook, pictures rattled, glass panes buzzed. Mom cried, Dad grabbed tools, desperate to reopen the wall. Rachel and I huddled in the kitchen with Kipper, our terrier, barking wildly. When Dad tore open the fresh plaster, a rush of air swept out, like the exhale of something that had been holding its breath. Silence followed. Dad stared inside the cavity. "It's deeper now," he whispered. That night, none of us slept. Within days, Mom insisted we move. We packed fast, left furniture behind. The developer who bought the house gutted it, but when I visited a year later, morbid curiosity, stupid bravery, I found the place rebuilt, new paint, new walls, open layout. But the foreman stared at me when I mentioned we were previous owners. "You lived here?" I nodded. He leaned closer. We opened every interior wall, found something strange. What? Empty space behind almost every bedroom wall, like tunnels. I tried to speak, but couldn't. He continued. "It wasn't for wiring. It was big enough for a person to crawl." "What did you do with them?" I croaked. "Filled them with concrete. House is solid now." He patted the wall. That night, lying in my apartment miles away, I heard a faint voice through the drywall. "You can't bury me." I don't sleep against walls anymore, because once you hear something asking to be let out, you never forget its voice, and sometimes it learns to follow.
I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, in a quiet suburban neighborhood where nothing ever really happened. Ours was the kind of street where people left their bikes out overnight, where porch lights were mostly decoration rather than necessity. I was 22 at the time, freshly moved back into my parents' house after college to save money. They were on vacation in Florida, so for a week, I had the house to myself. At first, I thought it was going to be amazing. Free food, privacy, and unlimited time to binge scary movies. I never expected the house itself would become the source of the horror. The first 2 nights were peaceful, but on the third, things started changing. I was brushing my teeth when I heard a faint, muffled sound overhead, almost like someone shifting their weight across wood. At first, I blamed mice. The attic had always been a dusty space where boxes gathered more memories than attention. Still, something about the sound bothered me. It wasn't the light scurrying of mice. It was slow, deliberate, rhythmic, like footsteps. I decided to ignore it. Houses settle, pipes creak, old wood expands when the temperature changes. That's what I kept telling myself. That night, around 2 a.m., I woke up thirsty and went downstairs for water. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. As I walked back up the stairs, I froze. There it was again. A single dragging footstep above my head, slow and heavy. My heart pounded against my ribs, but I still brushed it off, convincing myself that I was just spooked because the house was empty. The next morning, I checked the attic door. The pull string was swaying slightly, as if it had been disturbed. Maybe it was the fan, a draft? I rationalized it away. But that night, I could no longer deny it. I fell asleep watching TV in the living room around midnight. At 3:27 a.m. exactly, I jerked awake. Someone was walking across the hall upstairs. The footsteps were unmistakable. Heel, toe, slow, almost casual. There shouldn't have been footsteps. No one was home but me. I held my breath, waiting. The steps stopped outside my bedroom door upstairs. I stared at the ceiling, every muscle tense, waiting for something else. After nearly a minute, the steps returned, but headed back toward the attic. I lay there until sunrise, too terrified to move. After hours of internal war, I finally grabbed my dad's old baseball bat, pulled down the attic ladder, and climbed up fast, trying to surprise whatever was up there. What I found should have brought comfort, but it didn't. Nothing, just the boxes, old decorations, dusty trunks. Still, the insulation seemed disturbed, like small tunnels had been pushed through it. A blanket had been moved, and, worst of all, a granola bar wrapper lay under a box, one my mother kept in the pantry downstairs. Something had been up here, something human. I fled down the ladder and closed it up hard. But instead of calling the police, I convinced myself it was old. They must have been there weeks ago and left. My parents had been home before their trip. Surely they'd have noticed something. But they wouldn't have. They never went into the attic either. That night, I locked every door and window, turned on lights, double-checked everything. It didn't matter. Because at 2:46 a.m., the steps came again. Only this time, they didn't go back to the attic. They came down the stairs. Slowly, one step at a time. I stared toward the staircase entry, paralyzed. Whoever it was stopped at the bottom. I could hear slow breathing, ragged, wet, irregular, like someone who hadn't spoken to another person in a long time. I held the bat tighter. Then the breathing shifted, and I realized something horrifying. It wasn't coming from downstairs anymore. It was behind me. I spun, swinging wildly. The bat hit nothing, just air. I flicked the lamp on. No one was there. But the attic steps began to creak again, retreating upward. It was taunting me. The rest of the night I sat armed, lights blazing, TV on full volume to drown out every sound. In the morning, I went to the police. They searched the house, nothing. They looked through the attic, empty. They told me I was stressed, overtired, probably hearing expansion noises. They didn't believe me for a second. But when the officer left, he paused at the front door and turned back. "Keep your windows locked," he said quietly. "There's been break-ins in this area, people hiding in homes while residents are away." My blood froze. He didn't know my parents were gone. Neither had I mentioned it. Someone else had told them. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I camped on the couch, bat in hand, every light on. At 4:12 a.m., the TV flickered, then went dark. The overhead lights followed. The house was suddenly silent. Power was out, but only in my house. The street lamps outside still glowed. Then, from the pitch-dark hallway at the top of the stairs, a voice whispered, I've been here longer than you think. I bolted out the door barefoot and ran to the neighbors, banging until they opened. We called 911. By the time police arrived, whoever it was had vanished. But the evidence they found was worse than anything I'd imagined. The sleeping bag in the attic, water bottles, stolen pantry food, footprints, and a phone cable tied like a restraint. Someone had been living above me for days, maybe weeks. They never found him. My parents replaced the attic ladder, sealed the entry, installed security. But sometimes, when it rains hard and the roof expands at night, I swear I still hear those footsteps above my bedroom. Slow, deliberate, waiting. Don't forget to subscribe for more scary stories. Thank you for watching.